2.
Hi, I'm Josh Dougherty, CEO and co-founder of A Brave New, and the best advice I've ever received was to stay curious. And one of the reasons that I talk about this is really just the idea that if you ever stop asking questions, you're not going to be a great marketer anymore. Things are changing fast. And so we need to always be looking at things with fresh eyes, trying to learn something new to get better every day.
Wow. Staying curious. That's a great way to be very different from everybody else, Josh. Have you read any books by Michael Bungay Sanya? That's his big thing. He's about curiouser and curiouser. Have you read those?
I actually haven't, so now I need to check that out and make sure I'm not just borrowing his stuff unknowingly.
No, you're not. So, but he's all about that, or you could go all the way back to Lewis Carroll, right, with the Curious and Alice in Wonderland. But I agree, man. I think that's great about staying curious. And that's one of the reasons why I love to talk to smart folks like you about different things that are interesting to me. So today we're going to talk about differentiation, because I think that being curious certainly is a differentiating factor. So how does Josh Dougherty define differentiation?
Differentiation is about a couple things. I think, first of all, it's all about building unique memories. So we talk a lot about creating something that's like super, it's going to build competitive advantage, that's going to make you different, that's going to make you stand out from all your competition when we're doing branding work with people. But really, it all comes down to a memory. What does someone think about you when you leave the room? How do they remember you? Do they remember you any differently than the other people they've talked to that day? I think that's what differentiation is at the end of the day. It's about creating that memory that sticks.
Cool. So how do we do that, though, Josh, before we even get to meet someone? I mean, this is our first time talking to each other. You probably don't have any differentiated memories from me yet. I mean, I haven't spilled a coffee on your head or anything like that. So how do we do that right before we actually come in contact with someone?
Yeah, I think the big thing that I talk to people about as they're thinking about if there's someone who started a company is to think about, like, what are the things they want to be remembered for? What are the things they want to be, because a lot of times, I'll start over. Like, a lot of times people don't know their special sauce, or they don't know what makes them unique or what makes their company unique. They've never stopped to look at it and think about it. So this kind of goes back to the curiosity thing. You might think about, what do I want to be remembered for? But you could also go to your customers and say, how do you remember me? And actually listen and try to kind of remove the filters that you usually go through your day with, right? And see if there's some new things you can pick up. And then I think, like, by identifying that kernel, you're going to talk to people and there's going to be a theme that comes up, right? Or a couple themes. And by really identifying and tying those together, you can then kind of reverse engineer that into every engagement. And that's not just like in a conversation right here, like we're having, but also in the emails you send, the content you produce, every little conversation you have, you can be thinking about, okay, I want to be the person who is about memory, for example, if that's what I talk about a lot. I'm going to try to, mention that throughout everything that I'm doing. So people start to think about, oh yeah, Josh, he's the branding guy who's talking about memory and moving quickly. And that's, those are the things that help you stand out. And then it's about repetition, right? We know that it takes 5 to 6 to 10 times of repeating something for someone to actually start hearing what you're talking about. And so the other key is to not get bored yourself with repeating, because I know we talk about the same thing over and over again, but that doesn't mean your audience has heard about it that way.
Yeah, that's so critical, right? Not to get bored with our own messaging, not to get bored with our own brand. So we go from being the memory person to the person who's all about cold coffee. And it's like,
exactly.
Where'd you go, man? Where'd that happen? But the second part of that you said is really interesting. Not just memory, but speed. And I read your I guess, ebook, for lack of a better term, nice long prose about the secret of kind of branding fast, right? Of being really, really quick about that, right? That accelerated branding process. So first, when you talk about speed, like, how fast is that? And secondly, why is that so darn important, Josh?
Totally. So speed is, when we talk about this, the typical branding process can go from 12 to 24 months. We're talking about 6 months ideally. I've done it as fast as 3 months. That's a little suicidal. And so you may want to think about like, hey, let's slow it down slightly more than 3 months, but that's the speed factor. The reason it's so important is because the world's changing every day. People are learning new things, new technologies are coming out, iteration, evolution is happening at such a speed that if you take 24 months to develop out a brand, you are not going, there's a chance that the thing you decide is going to be differentiated at the beginning, someone's claimed by the end of that process. The other thing that we think about from a branding process is the real world experience, just like in digital marketing, and this is maybe where I borrow some of my past as a digital marketer and my present doing digital marketing strategy for our clients, is about testing and iteration. So as long as you identify like what's that single memory at the middle of your brand, we call that concept the essence. As long as you understand that essence, you can iterate on talking about it hundreds of different ways and still be building your brand, but then responding in real time to how people are responding to those ideas that you're putting out there, which in the end makes sure it's a brand that's tested by reality, not just by kind of conceptual ideas that you built out with your team.
Excellent. So find your essence first, get there, and then you can blow that up from there. But almost like your core value, right? You put your stake in the ground, your flag in the ground, whatever you want to call it, and you work from there, as opposed to, oh my gosh, I've got to have all these elements, all these things that have to be in place before I move forward. I like that, Josh. I think that's important. So why is that? Why is that not done more often? I mean, why don't we just stick it in there? Is it because we're nervous, or what are you finding with your clients?
I think there's a couple things. I think there's like a class of people, right, that don't even want to decide to pursue their brand because they're nervous about spending money on it because they don't think it's going to help their business. They're like, I can already close deals. I can do all these things. So that's the one thing that I hear from our clients. And that's true as long as you have magnetic people. But if you lose your magnetic people and there's no core underneath your brand for your organization, you're sunk, right? Branding is about creating that continuity across about the organization to keep you safe. So that's one group of people. I talk about how branding is the best way to safeguard your future as an organization, regardless of who works for you. Because if you can give everyone a playbook for living out something unique for your organization, you're going to win. Then the other group of people, why people are, I think, afraid of that are, I think that there's so much data today, and I love data, so I'm not criticizing, but there can be a paralysis that happens because you're trying to collect more data to get to the perfect thing. And I think this is really an instance where perfect is the enemy of great. I wouldn't even say the enemy of good. And so we're not trusting ourselves enough to make a step forward. You need data to inform you, but you can then come up with the core concepts and move forward. And then the other thing that I would say with that is that I think people are really cognizant that brands can get pummeled. Like you think about Robinhood, right? A couple of weeks ago, they make a decision to ban some trading on their site, and their brand is pretty much ruined overnight. And so people are afraid that that's going to happen if they move quickly. That's not going to happen if you move quickly. That's going to happen if you don't move smartly. And so you need to think about what's that essence, and then stay true to it. And people aren't going to mind if you talk about it in 10 different ways, as long as the core concept is true, and as long as you're being, I think, honest, authentic, and doing things the right way.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the way you describe a brand sounds a lot like the way a lot of leadership people describe a culture. It's a living organism that has an essence. We build out around that, and we get everybody kind of indoctrinated in that, so that when people leave, we don't have to worry so much about, oh my gosh, this was the only keeper of our brand flame, of our culture. And therefore, everybody has a little bit more of that, and our customers still get great service. Am I hearing you right, Josh?
Yeah, I love the connection actually with culture, because when we talk with people about a brand, we say it's not about a marketing campaign. It's not about this. It is about an organizational ethos. So I think about a tech company that we work with. It's really hard to differentiate in tech, right? You're all doing tech consulting. You're all moving everyone to the cloud. You're helping them think through tough problems. And so the I think with them, we got to the point where it's like, we're not selling tech consulting. We're selling the core concept or the idea behind your brand, which is what the idea was, clarity. So we're selling people clarity in a super confusing tech world. And then, like, what that allows us to do is be able to, I think about all the touch points. How do we pursue clarity in our HR? How do we pursue clarity in how we do our consulting? How do we pursue clarity in how we structure our services? How do we pursue clarity in how we're doing our marketing? Brand needs to be at the center of everything so that it can influence all other areas of the organization. So I think, like, what you brought up about culture is really true. And I think the best culture consultants are really thinking a little bit about brand, right? They're also thinking that core memory that we're creating.
Yeah, well, your memory, your promise, right? Who are you at your core? At the end of the day, when you strip it all away, what are you? So that's great. That's good. I'm glad I wasn't too off base there. So let's pivot from that to let's talk about the people, because I think that's really important, right? People make up our brands, and now we're all virtual. I mean, I'm not in Seattle, you're not in Florida, but yet we're still connected here. So how do we do a better job of connecting in those the virtual spaces instead of, the old days we called it the meet space back when Slashdot was a thing?
Totally. I think that's different, right, for your team than it is for, like, people externally. For a team, like, we have people across 3 states in our organization. So I think it's like going the extra mile at every interaction. We do video for every conversation we do. I actually do that for new business and for all my external conversations too, because it's almost as good. I think, like, as well, you need to just think about, like, okay, if we're facilitating this meeting or we're doing this type of thing, like, how do we make it as impactful on a screen from a collaboration perspective, from people being able to dive in as we do in person? Now, I'm a person who really still believes in this in-person connection and meeting as well. So I'm excited to get through COVID a little bit so that we can start doing that, because I think that kind of that in-person collaboration can't be replicated to a certain extent. We do our best digitally, but it can't be replicated. And then the final piece, I think, is going back to the basics of being able to pick up the phone. I do this both internally and externally, saying it's time that we don't just send another email about something. Don't just ping someone on Slack, but actually grab the phone and talk to them and see if you can work through a challenge that way or make a connection that way. It's surprising to people because people don't do it that often in an authentic way. Certainly you get calls from cold callers, but can you get a call, or you don't often get calls from someone who's being thoughtful and wanting to build that connection, both on a client perspective, from a new business perspective, and from an internal team perspective.
Wow. Well, that's fascinating to me to hear from a marketer who says, hey, we need to pick up the phone and not just rely on inbound to drive our business or to drive our culture. I mean, I can tell you, Josh, that picking up the phone with a teammate is so much more powerful than sending an email. We can spend 10 minutes just talking through things. Even if we don't resolve anything, just that human connection, I think we find that people give us a little bit more grace, a little bit more understanding, a little bit more patience than if we're just going back and forth via text. And then with our sales, I mean, that's my life, man. If it weren't for picking up the phone, we'd be dead. So how do you tell those other agency owners that are like, well, hey, man, we just got to write more great content and over SEO things and be better at that? I mean, how do you convince them that the telephone actually is your best friend?
It's a good question. I think it's all about how much of an impact you want to make. You can certainly, I think there's the pairing between the two things is really important. So we're an inbound agency, right? We do SEO. We've tried to own our space. We try to create great in-depth content for people to come to. We have leads come in that way. We work a referral network. But at the end of the day, we also do outbound because we believe that it is the best way to connect with the exact right people that we want to work with. So we're kind of doing a pairing of like filtering and drawing people in and kind of qualifying those people to make sure that they're right for us. And then also choosing like the, top 50, 100 people that we actually want to work with and going outbound to them because we want to work with them so badly that we're going to do what it takes to get in front of them. And 99% of the time, like, people don't answer the phone when I call, right? But they respond a lot quicker to an email, or an email that comes afterwards that says, hey, I just left you a voicemail. I'd love to talk to you. It's a simple email to send, and they respond back to us that way. And I think the same thing is true of our clients, as we do both demand generation, both in a growth or an inbound marketing perspective and an account-based marketing perspective. We're pairing inbound and outbound to get companies further faster.
Awesome. Awesome. So do you do the outbound, or do you just advise on that, or how does that work, Josh?
Our organization works largely with B2B companies that are doing high value sales. So something that's like over $100,000 per sale. And so we're usually pairing with a sales team. So we will advise and collaborate with the sales team, work on phone scripts that'll work with our with the campaign that we're running, doing that sort of thing. But it's largely a collaborative process, because at the end of the day, we have to engage also as marketers with the sales team in a really productive way to be successful. I think there's a lot of, and you've probably been in this business long enough as well to know, like, this constant like battle between the marketers and the sales team. And sales is always saying, you're not sending me enough good leads, or you're sending me, or like, I can't connect with these leads. And marketers are like, well, we're doing everything we can. And I think really, like, getting into these during campaigns, we strive to do monthly meetings with the sales team and the marketing team to build that understanding. And then we're sharing tactics back and forth. And that gets us both in the trenches to do better work together. So.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, Josh. I'd find that building upon the marketing message, right? Marketing is often the kernel, right? They start the ball, but then sales will get it, right? They'll transform it a little bit and then maybe pass it back to marketing to clean it up a little more, or to say, hey, marketing, I really could use some content about this, because this is where we're getting questions. And as long as they're aligned, right? As long as they're all going for the same goal, what you might call their essence or their brand, really, because that is really what they're trying to do, right? They want more good clients, not just any clients. To get more of that, right? We have to spend time together. So those monthly alignment calls are important. So can you give me, I'm not looking for like a specific customer, but can you talk me through a little bit of what those monthly alignment meetings look like as far as agenda goes, so we can make sure that folks, maybe they start doing those?
Yeah, we're doing three things usually in those meetings. So one, we're reviewing all the leads that came in the previous month and talking about which ones of them were strong, which ones of them are weak, which ones were marketing thinking like, this is the most amazing lead we've ever passed. And sales is like, of course that we can't follow up on that lead. So one of it is like that forced accountability that drives a conversation. This goes back to that picking up the phone concept. If we're all on a video conference together, which is like the modern phone, no one's hiding and everyone feels more comfortable talking about what did and didn't work than if it's a big email string going back and forth together. So that's the first thing. The second thing is talking about like intelligence that the sales team is capturing. I think something that marketing teams need to understand is that sales are one of the top experts on who your prospects are, what they need. The things I always think about in branding too, like what's keeping you up, what's keeping the prospect up at night. A salesperson can answer that way easier than a marketer who's just looking at some data. So we want to pair together the data marketing brings with the real life qualitative intelligence that a sales team brings to make our marketing better. So that's the second thing we do, is like, we're understanding what are the conversations you have, what are the trends. And then I think the third thing is really zeroing in on action items with individual people attached to them. I mean, for better or worse, right? This is about an accountability mechanism built into like relationship that's strong, because people don't want to be held accountable by people they don't trust. And so we need to build that trust, and then we need to build accountability in for everybody so that the whole campaign can perform effectively.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh. That's super helpful. Little tips there that we can use to get started along the journey of alignment, which is so valuable. So as we're kind of moving here from talking about accountability and sales, let's talk a little bit about visual content, because you guys do a lot of great websites, you do a lot of great branding work. Let's talk about visual content. And you wrote an article that I really liked that was really simple, but super powerful. And that is that even if you don't have a designer on your team, you still have to focus on visual content. So talk to me about that visual content and how we can differentiate ourselves with that visual content.
Yeah, so I think the visual content is so important for a couple of reasons. First, like the world is video today. So if you're not creating any video, you're going to be sunk. Second, everyone's expecting to have that Apple type experience, which I think is the most unrealistic thing that I've been dealing with for the last 10 years of my career, but everyone expects it, right? And so you've got to figure out how to create something that has a shine or a gloss to it. And it's a real trust factor today, right? If I land on a website that doesn't look like it's modern, doesn't look professional, doesn't have that differentiated visuals, it's going to be hard for me to say, yeah, I'm going to trust these guys and work with them. And so that's really the reason behind it. I think like the things that we think about from visuals are two. You have your brand identity that you really should work with a professional on. We originally worked with someone externally to ourselves to build our brand, our visuals. We've iterated on it since, but I think like that's a key thing to everyone, even agency owners who are saying we have that expertise in-house. I would say you will benefit from a third party working on something and not it not being you, because they will be able to see you more clearly. So that brand identity should be built around kind of those ideas of whatever that essence is that you come up with. Now, from like a day-to-day visual content, there's a bunch of tools that you can actually use to create visuals quickly. One thing is like you can use an iPhone to create great video, right? I talked to my creative director, built a couple masks that were super simple in an Adobe product, and now I can record video, post it up there, it looks great. And so like create that visuals quickly with your iPhone for video. The second thing is using tools like Canva or something like that allows you to create something that's going to get caught in people's eyes as they're scrolling through social media to be able to differentiate yourself and, really just show up in someone's newsfeed. And so we like to use Canva. There's a number of other tools out there that allow you to create some templates and then use them. The third thing I would think about is like maybe you're someone who can't create a bunch of visual designs. Maybe you don't have that capacity in-house. Can you think about a differentiated photo style and then search and only use photos like that so that people can start remembering you by the photo style you're using? All kinds of different little tricks. And I think all of them help you stand out. And then oftentimes you may get stuck and you could work with a designer just to build a framework for what you're going to do going forward with just saying, hey, I need some help getting started. And then I can run with it.
Yeah, I think starting out with someone who does design, having that foundation, building your brand assets, getting a brand guide so everybody understands, hey, this is the font we use. Just simple stuff like that can really help you stand out because it looks the same. It gets back to your point earlier about repetition. Over and over and over and over and over again, you want to repeat what you're trying to get at here. And one of those big things that I know you have on repeat, and you've said it before, and that is speed. So Josh, if we want to get going fast here, and we're thinking, holy crap, how do I get going fast on a brand, on a website, on something that actually is going to make a difference in our business?
Yeah, so there's a concept that I always use for everything. And this is and everyone's like, oh, we can carry that across most things. I think you can. It's like build the minimum viable product, the pilot, and accept that it's not going to be perfect or full featured right away. And then launch that, see how people react to it and improve upon it. Specifically, if you're thinking about like a brand, I think there's 3 specific questions that I would recommend people ask. I just wrote a recent blog post about this. You can go check out on our website. But really, I would start by asking these 3 questions and then go from there. So the first question is, what memory do you want your company to leave in people's minds? People often don't think about what their brand is, but they can think about like, what's that sticky memory we want to create? The next question is, what do you want your legacy to be? So this is really targeted towards founders. Like, what do I want to be remembered for? Because often the founder is inextricably tied with the business. And then the third is, how can you ensure your company is will continue to succeed when you're gone. And the reason this third question is super important is that it will surface the things that are problem areas where things are going to fall apart if you don't have your best people in the room. And then you'll be able to build some structures to help translate what your best people do into the rest of the organization. So that's from a branding perspective, what we would do to start.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Josh. So you guys do some, like I said, some great branding work and some great website work. So let's flip that over. Let's take, as we wrap up here, let's take that with our website. If we want to make that a piece of that, and let's say that we have the brand already established, because we took your great 3 questions. How do we get started building that website that's going to differentiate us from our competition and really be an asset instead of a liability?
Yeah, so the first thing to think about is we use a model for web design where we're starting with asking what are the key things that we need people to do on the website for it to be successful. Oftentimes people are creating a site that is just sharing their brand, for lack of a better word, or their company as a kind of like a brochure that people wouldn't come back to. We're trying to say, what do you want them to do? And how do you want people to interact with you? And then we'll build out the functionality backwards from there to make that happen. Now that sounds kind of technical. At the end of the day, I think the key to a differentiated website is to stop talking about yourself as much and to start thinking about what does my audience actually need? And then I'm going to build content around that, and I'm going to build engagement points that will actually solve people's problems as opposed to just trying to get them to get in touch with me to buy what I want to sell. And then from a really practical perspective, I encourage you to think ruthlessly about what do you actually need to get started with your website. If you're unhappy with your current website, could you launch a new homepage, and that could be your entire site to begin with? That's going to be much easier to get launched in a month, right, than a fully functional site. And then you can build on the stuff after the fact as you see it happening and working in the real world. And so I think it's about how do we get to what is the minimum that we can launch that will represent us well, that talks about us well, that engages with our customers in a really meaningful way, launch it, and then build on it, as opposed to waiting, again, with websites, 6 to 9 to 12 months to launch a site. What if you launch something in a month and then you spent the next 12 months adding new features and people get delighted every time they come back because there's something new there each and every time they visit?
Wow. Launch and iterate. That's great advice, Josh. And I love the surprise and delight factor there. As you're adding new features, that also gives you something to talk about and maybe to pick up the phone and call our prospects and say, you know what? Hey, we didn't have this before, but now we've got this, and we built this just for you and people like you, which gives you something to talk about in a genuine way.
Yeah, it's such a power of a good inbound program too, and a good outbound program. If you're creating great content, you have reasons to reach out to people, and you can delight them in every single interaction, as opposed to just saying, hey, it's Josh, I'm following up. I'd love to sell you a website. I can more be like, hey, here's this great resource on branding. I noticed that, we had a conversation 6 months about this. I wanted to give you this so you could be thinking about it. No obligation to buy, but I'm making their life better as I'm reaching out. So.
Yeah. Always be adding value, Josh. That's the way that I sell and the way that I teach. And I love that that's how you're aligned as well. It's great to see the awesome work you guys are doing at A Brave New. That's at abravenew.com. But Josh, if you were looking to have people connect with you in a meaningful way so that they could maybe ask you some questions, some deeper insights about what they heard today and what maybe we didn't say today, where would you send them and how would they get there?
Yeah, so two specific places. I'm on LinkedIn all the time, so come connect with me. Let's have conversations there. So you can look up Josh Dougherty, A Brave New on LinkedIn. I'll come up. The other place that I would say you can go is you can go to the About page on our website and you can actually book some time with me. There's an open link that links into my calendar. So anyone who wants to have a conversation, I think this goes back to the curiosity thing. I'd love to talk to anyone about how to make their business better. I think that sharing of ideas makes all of us smarter. Whether you think you want to work with us in the future or you're just wanting to get some advice. Let's talk, let's have a conversation, and let's figure out, how we can have a good time doing it.
Awesome. Love that. I found you on LinkedIn because I was reading some articles about differentiation and I reached out, and I'm so glad you said yes to being part of this conversation today and for sharing all your great frameworks and all your great blog posts, Josh. It was so good to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.